Hi everyone, it's Margaret Manning here with lifeafterdeath.com. Lifeafterdeath.com is a community of people who have a fascination with the subject of life after death, who have an interest in spirituality, the afterlife, near-death experience, and we interview wonderful experts who can help us get clarity on some of these amazing topics. And my guest today is Linda Fitch. Linda is a teacher, a trainer, and a shaman. She has studied with Inca medicine men and women in Peru, and she has been a teacher of shamanistic energy medicine for over a decade. She also is the developer of a program called Dying Consciously Teacher Training Program, and she's trained thousands of students in shamanistic medicine healing techniques. She's also got workshops and programs that she does that combine neuro-linguistic programming with shamanism, grief, and ritual. And since one of the key pivots of shamanism is service, she loves to give back to the community and to the world. So I'm welcoming Linda Fitch. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. I love that you have the afterlife and that whole curiosity about the afterlife.
Yes. Well, in fact, I think that's probably, if you get right down to it, the thing that most people think about, whether they have a faith or not, is that what does happen to this body when we die. So I would love to chat with you about that and how shamanism, answers the question and gives some perspectives on how to find peace and understanding of something we never will know until we do it.
Right. And it's the in covering part of this, what we'll do is also talk about some of the material that it comes from.
Okay.
Some of it comes from the shamanic practices, and it's those, the shamans and individuals that have always had death as part of their training practice.
Right.
And part of why they do that is because not only do we want to know the way home and not be asking directions on the way home, but that we want to be able to sit with somebody else and be present when they're crossing so we can help them cross. Okay. And then it also develops a body of wisdom.
Perfect.
So that wisdom that we're going to talk about comes from the shamanic perspective. But there's also lots of other cultures that have created what we would almost call maps, if you look at it that way. Yes. Like the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, that's one of the more famous ones that has a certain, but the Egyptians have the same thing, their books.
Okay.
So there's been lots of, there are actually death books throughout time that teach about how do we work with this place. So when I teach in my classes, it really is, we depend on all these different maps. So from those that have studied it and worked with death, that it isn't just something we put in the back room, or in the hospital, it's something that we work with, and what's the practices that we do around that. And then because that whole near-death experience is a really new experience. If we go back 100 years ago, if you had a near-death experience, and actually people in classes raise their hand, if they had a near-death experience, you more than likely died. We didn't have modern medicine. We didn't have the defibrillator.
Yeah.
We didn't have any of the resuscitation stuff. If you had that, you more than likely die. It's actually Plato that talks about that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Very first near-death experiences was documented of a soldier that was on a pylon of people ready to be burned that woke up. So this whole near-death experience, and I know you interviewed Raymond Moody, who does the real famous work with it.
Yes.
So there's similarities that come up when people go through this experience.
I was going to ask you that. Yeah, what are the similarities?
Yeah, and it's such a short experience. Think about it. If you're gone, and I know there's people that have written books of being out longer, but that I've read. But you're gone more than 4 minutes. It's hard on the body.
Yes.
It's hard on the brain. There's certain things that no longer work well when they don't get the oxygen, when they don't get the things. So when you are, if you think about it, if we put the timer on for 3 minutes to see what you notice. Yeah. So some of those similarities that both Raymond Moody talked about, and I'm just going to pull that note up.
Yeah, I remember. Some of the topics are, it's very interesting you mentioned that, by the way, just as you're getting your notes there, is that when I was in college, I actually did a paper on this, and I was comparing the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which is where they take you through the Tibetan stages, and a tribe of Indians called the Winnebago they're in Michigan, and they had a thing called the Book of Life.
Yeah.
which was used in the ceremonies where the young boys became men. So it was used at any transition time, which is what we now, we will say, if you can practice dying, through those milestones in your life, then death at the end is not so difficult. But anyway, you're going to continue. Sorry.
No, that's perfect. And because it is those, and we're jumping a little bit, but it's those, when we do those milestones.
Yes.
In our modern day, it would be the death of a spouse. Even getting married or having a baby is a pretty big milestone.
Yeah, it can be.
In a family, if we have learned a certain way of dealing with that milestone, which could be with every time that there's a loss that happens, every time there's a new thing, there's an ending.
Yes.
And if we haven't learned how to deal with the endings, all of that kind of goes in a Santa Claus bag.
Totally.
That we don't deal with.
Well, they celebrate and acknowledge that transition in a ceremony. I mean, that's why they read the book, not just, it's when they recognize this is a moment of transition.
Right. And loss, and deal with it. Work through that unfinished business with it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So tell me about the shamanistic perspective on this, though. I mean, do you, in the shaman tradition, is there a specific set of things you can expect to happen to you after you die?
From a shamanic standpoint, let's talk about the journey a little bit.
Okay.
And then kind of the place with it. So,
okay.
And the journey is fairly similar of everything that you hear from a shamanic place of, and that's why you learn spirit flight, how to leave your body. So typically, as in Moody's work or in the Tibetan, there's a loud roar, there's a noise, and then there's and then, or the wind or whatever, the elements. Mm-hmm. And then there's a place of leaving your physical body where you can actually see your physical body.
Yeah.
So the shaman learns how to journey or go on that spirit flight of allowing the energetic body to separate. We want to learn how to separate from the physical body. So to know how to do that, so that's one of the places that's similar between Moody's work and the Tibetan work, is this separation.
Separation, yep.
And then from a shamanic standpoint, in that same way as we journey, and many times it's talked about as that we journey up, we fly up from that perspective. From a shamanic, we talk about that there's an upper world and a lower world.
Okay.
So we journey up into the upper world, and in that there's barriers, almost like saran wrap, like a thin
plastic.
layer,
layer,
like a plastic, like a layer you have to work through.
Wow.
And depending on the culture you come from and the shamanic tradition you come from, sometimes they say, like the Hopi talk about those worlds that you go up through resemble this earthly plane. Like there's there's a plane of green, there's a plane of brown, there's a plane of animals. So that depends on how you've learned. So, but it's this journey up. Why? Through the Bardo, we would say in some traditions, that Bardo planes, why you would want to make sure you don't journey somewhere else, that you journey back up to the light, that you go, and not that this one's bad, down lower in the shamanic traditions, and for example, like the Sami, in the Celtics, some of their beliefs, the Druid, they believe that we'll go in wading down into the lower world. So, and that we have guides, and it's a healthy place. It's not a bad place.
Now, this is so fascinating. So, I mean, do the shamans, like when we're talking about shamans, you actually, because we talked about this earlier, it's across all different religions. So, and you said it's cultural, that your color or the thickness of the saran wrap or whatever might be different depending on your culture. But are there any principles in the shamanic tradition that when you go to work with your medicine men and women in Peru, where maybe that's some kind of an authentic living tradition, it's still being practiced every day there, isn't it? I mean, when someone is about to, how do they have ceremonies at different stages in people's lives, or how does that work?
Absolutely, that different stages in the lives, and that last stage with it. Part of it is getting ready for that spirit flight, letting go of all that unfinished business with it, getting the body ready for it so that flight is easy. and then journeying with them. That's that psychopomp, the one that travels with them, that death walker. A lot of people here do that with others. We want to be able to then go with them to the light. And we make sure that they go to the light. And typically what I'll do is you can see someone that they love or a guide that will be there for
to join them. Yeah.
To join them. You can see, sometimes you actually see hands come across to take little babies that have died back over.
Wow.
It's just so touching. It's incredible. So and we want to close the door. You don't want to leave that door open.
Yeah.
I had a student whose husband had, he was a fisherman, actually a sailor in the North Sea, and he had little kids at home, and they were out at sea, and one of the other sailors fell overboard, and he jumped in to save them, and of course then he never made it. Both of them died. So what started happening after that, he was coming down to visit her, but the door was open, and she was having things that didn't have a body, that were not healthy for her, like from the Bardo plains, were coming into her life.
Wow.
So, and that would be that we want to learn how to walk somebody over to the light, give them to the light, and then say our goodbyes. That we can have a connection with them, and that we can have all that's super. We can have chats, conversations, everything. And that it is to help them to the light. That's the goal, is to help them go to the light.
Wow. Has it ever happened to you when you've been working with someone that near death and they've actually died or looked like they were dead and then come back? Have you ever spoken to anyone?
I have when I teach, because we'll go through the practice of going through your own death and going through that spirit flight. I've had to do that double take of looking twice to make sure they were still breathing. And they're all told.
Oh my gosh.
But it will come back.
Wow.
I have a pretty strong, you will come back. So they can go across, have the experience. And it's so cool, Margaret, that same thing that Moody in his research found is there's no time over there. There's no time. So, and that's that great life review that happens in seconds, is there's no time. I've had students that, and because again, 3-4 minutes is a long time to be out, that have gone out, and I'm watching the clock because they're told to bring everybody back, and they're out a good 4 minutes, like long, where I'm starting to get a little like, come on, bring her back. And their group is around them, because we'll do this when we do it in person in a group. Nobody's touching them, nobody's anything. They'll come back, and I watch them turn to their group and go, you didn't let me stay out there. I was out there for only just hardly anything. And I'm like, are you kidding?
And then yeah, that's a really, gosh.
Changes.
It's interesting. Well, we started these conversations with you because, Shaman, you're a shaman, Linda. I mean, this is one of the things I was interested in, but our conversations are going far beyond shamanism, which is maybe why shamanism is such a powerful force in the world today. I know that many people do make the trip to Peru and the Amazon. And in fact, we have a shaman in Switzerland, one of my friends goes to, and this is a woman, in her 60s. And it's not something that's like out the edges anymore. I mean, do you find that's true with shamanism in your practice? It's becoming more accepted.
Yeah, I do. One of my dreams is that at one time acupuncture, you could never find it in the yellow pages, and now you can find it. Yeah. So my dream is that actually they would be something like that with it. And here's the thing that for anybody that's listening, that to some people, because it's kind of like anytime anything gets to be a fad, or it's like people will go to a weekend workshop and they go, I'm a shaman. So I would just be really, really aware, because it's the ethics that the individual person walks with.
Yes.
That it's really a path of service. Yeah.
No, I know, and a lot of people are attracted to the shaman tradition because of the drugs and the ayahuasca and other things that are being offered as part of that transformation process. Like, take this medicine and you will, your journey will be heightened or expedited. And that could be, but I think a lot of people are actually getting not hooked on it in an addictive way, but think that is the essence of shamanism. Maybe you'd like to just chat briefly about that.
Yeah, I have a whole soapbox, so I'll keep
Well,
it
there's
really
an
short.
association, so let's just
Yeah,
do it.
we'll just do it really super short. So the people that actually work with the things, and ayahuasca is actually, Aya means death, so it's the vine of death.
Oh,
Isn't it cool? I mean,
didn't know that. Okay.
it's all about, so Aya means death. And there's actually a ceremony that we can talk about. And one of those is called an Aya despacho. So it's a prayer offering for the dead. It's so beautiful, so beautiful. So in the ayahuasca, it is an amazing plant, and the plant itself is called a medicine plant. And it is calling people right now. I think that's why we see it in so many countries and so many people doing it, is the plant itself is saying we need to work with death. We see the death cafes, we see all these death doulas, that we need to work with death in our culture. I don't recommend it unless you are actually with a trained shaman. The shaman I work with down in the jungle had 10 years of training with his uncle. He had to take ayahuasca every day for 10 years. No, total abstention. I mean, it was a rigorous training. Because what they learn to do is they have to hold the whole group. So if one person is going through their death experience on journey out, something else that somebody else is going through. So if there's a woman sitting across the circle whose ex is really angry with her, the ex can actually do harm to this other person. So the shaman has to hold the whole group. So I really don't recommend it and I'm yet to find, I'm not saying they're not out there, but I've yet to find anyone so I recommend going down to the source. I recommend really vetting and knowing who you're working with. And it's not a recreational thing. It's a very spiritual place to walk and to be able to, it does magic, but to let go of things and to really be in somewhere where you can be held in that very spiritual container of, with a shaman that knows his business.
Yeah, well, thank you for saying that, because I think there's a curiosity about it, and people do associate with shamanism that vine of death, which is the ayahuasca medicine or potion. And I'm glad you talked about that. That's really helpful. Yeah. But anyway, the shaman tradition has come to the modern world. There's people like you here that are translating it. Linda's website is lindafitch.com, and you've got workshops coming up. And do you have a book? I should have asked you that at the very beginning. Have you written anything?
It's in the works. I actually have.
Okay.
But the book's going to be about time, because, just like with death, it's that time piece that there is no time. How does a shaman work with time? How do you work with time? And as we're talking about, as we age, then how do we do this? What's our making a difference in the world?
Yeah.
What are the beliefs we need to hold now that will change it for your granddaughter? That will change it for your grandson?
Well, that's where this deeper awareness of life and the happiness comes from. I think that they've even proven it now, that people that are socially engaged, people that are doing things for other people, live longer, they have healthier lives. So over time, it's wise to come, like you say, come to grips with that unfinished business before you die. Yeah. Fantastic conversation, Linda. I've enjoyed every second of it. And if you've got any questions, by the way, just put them in the section below. I keep reminding myself we're talking to you probably on YouTube here. So leave questions for Linda and I'll pass them on, and we can continue our conversation at some other time. But this has been great. Thank you very much, Linda. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our Life After Death YouTube channel and visit our website at lifeafterdeath.com. We are a community of people who are fascinated by the topic of life after death and subjects like near-death experience, the afterlife, reincarnation, and spirituality. Together, we are exploring and discovering these topics together with curiosity and an open heart.